Britain's kayak world champion, Richard Fox, and from the United States, John Lugbill, who has been 5 times world champion in the single canoe class. It's with Lugbill that we start. Our commentators are Jeremy Taylor and David Goldstrom.
Last year, and in front of his own home crowd, 29-year-old John Lugbill from America, in the first of his 2 runs, led the world's best single canoeist by almost 12 seconds. But that turned out to be the appetizer, for this was his second run. The #1 whitewater paddler in a canoe. And just look at this, he really is magnificent as he comes through here. Power, he's driving the canoe on, the cheers are ringing out, he's loving every moment of this.
We haven't seen anybody that comes anywhere close to comparing with this. This is a demonstration run.
Now as he comes on this long paddle down to the downstream gates. Just look at that, driving in there with the J-stroke, the canoe moving on down there with enormous speed. He's just eating up the water here. 7 downstream, whizzes through there. Oh, this is great stuff.
Oh, I don't believe it. He's done a Murano on gate 8, a reverse spin behind the gate. Very, very difficult to control. Very fast if you can pull it off.
And it's just relentless. Drive, drive, drive. Left-handed paddler, occasionally resorting to that bow stroke across the bow, which he does there as he prepares to come into the 9 and 10 combination. Oh, slots the bow of the canoe straight between those 2 poles. Brilliant.
The thing that's standing out here is the acceleration. He's accelerating out and into every gate.
Cross to 11. What does he do with this one?
Oh, he's holding on. That was beautiful. And a direct move down to 12.
Now down to 19, the cheers ringing out. Again, he catches the wave to help him with the speed, move on down to 20. And watch the approach here as he comes in. The breakout. Round he goes there. And on goes the canoe.
That's a nose turn. One of the hardest moves in the book. Beautifully flowing round through 20-22.
And now he's trying to beat his own time, 3:32.13, the time that he did on the first run. So he's got about 30 seconds to do the last 3 gates. And watch this move now.
Fabulous. Drove straight into the gate line. Absolutely perfect.
Well, I don't think we've seen any mistakes, and if there have been any, I think only John Lugbill would be the man to point them out to us, because this is perhaps the greatest run ever we've seen down a river, and the applause ringing out. And look at that, he smashed his own time. He's clean as well, and John Lugbill underlines all the superlatives that are rained on him, and he deserves every one of them. By the end of the summer, he'd also added a 2nd World Cup championship to his impressive collection. The title he was now looking forward to defending here in Tacen, just a couple of kilometers from the center of Ljubljana in northern Slovenia. Victorious in the first 3 of this year's 5 championship races, only his fellow countryman David Hearn could deny him a hat-trick of World Cups. With 25 points on offer to the winner, theoretically, Frenchman Carlo Falocci could equal Lugbill's score, whilst teammate Emmanuel Bruvin and Britain's Gareth Marriott still had hopes of a place on the championship podium. Ahead of them all, 2 runs over a short 400-metre 20-gate course, including just after the start, one of the most challenging sections of white water to be found anywhere in the world. Kneeling in his canoe and using a single-bladed paddle, Yugoslavia's Jose Vidmar set the pace with a fast and clean first run. No penalties, having negotiated his way down without touching any of the green or white downstream gates, or indeed the red and white poles identifying the upstream gates, where the paddler must break out of the fast water below the gate before paddling up against the stream and between the 2 poles. Good, precise moves by the local man across the boiling water to arrive tight to the gate, thereby saving himself valuable seconds. The next problem, a tricky angular gate set above a stopper where the water curls back and holds the paddler. Vidmar in trouble, but out again as he goes across to yet another upstream gate. This time, not so tight. Down to the middle section of the course, where the water surges off the concrete walls of this artificial course, making the timing for all the paddlers extremely difficult. Vidmar knowing that he has to try and improve his time on the second run, with the great Americans John Lugbill and David Hearn still to race. Poles set uncharacteristically high above the water on this course, making it easier for the paddlers to squeeze their bodies underneath. Fifth in the World Cup 2 years ago, sixth last year, and needing a victory or a high finish to improve on that position this season. But close to the bottom of the course, it was clear that that was not to be. His time on the second run was slower, and he'd missed a gate, collecting 50 seconds of penalties, and so it would be his first run that would ultimately determine his finishing position. For this final race of the season, seventh was the best he could finish. As he went through the last gate, the time of his first run was that would count, 142.91 seconds. Frenchman Emmanuel Brugvin arrived here in top form, having just a few days earlier won his first World Cup race on the home waters of the River Isère at Bourg-Saint-Maurice. But here he found Tacen's powerful water difficult to handle. His first run time 70 seconds slower than Vidmar, plus 2 5-second penalties for 2 gate touches. Talented young Frenchman, just 20 years of age, from Besançon, making his mark amongst the best, though, in this World Cup company. Touch there, a 5-second penalty. Using those long levers to power the canoe through the gates. Much more comfortable during this middle section of the course, but knowing that he needs a much faster time if he's to score points in this, the 5th and final race of the World Cup, as he has in the previous 4. Member of a very strong French squad who've been none too happy during this World Cup race with the water conditions. Supplied from a barrage further upstream, but the water coming at uneven quantities through the big sluice gates at the top of the course, making it a lottery for some of the paddlers. But Brugvin working well and looking in this second run on course for a faster time. But 1:49.44 was still not good enough to challenge the leaders. Third in this season's rankings, before the final race, the Frenchman with the Italian-sounding name, 21-year-old Carlo Falocci. Born in Nice, but like Brugvin, living in Besançon. Putting the canoe on its edge to gain acceleration through the opening gates. Rolling over and up in the powerful water at the top of the course. A big hole above and below the second gate. But not missing any gates and not incurring the 50-second penalty that virtually knocks every paddler out of the competition. His first run, though, none too fast. 190 seconds, including 1 5-second penalty for a single gate touch. So Carlo, knowing that to keep his place on the podium, he had to go faster. Using the big paddle like a rudder to turn round the poles. breaking out below the upstream gate and then on down to the next green and white set of gates downstream. 1 meter 79, 75 kilos, and much improved in his technique. A year ago in the World Championships, he was a disappointing 28th, having missed a gate on both runs. But in the World Cup last year, he finished 9th. And showed signs towards the end of the season of the promise that he's displayed throughout this year's World Cup. Never out of the top 4, his best position before today's race, second in Bourg-Saint-Maurice on his own home French water. The second run, better than the first, 139.38 seconds. Ultimately, good enough for 6th place on the race and 10 valuable World Cup points. The runner-up in the last 2 World Cups, David Hearn of the United States, set out knowing that nothing less than a victory would do if he was to overtake his great rival John Lugbill. Hearn and Lugbill, friends, rivals throughout the 80s. At the top, Hearn even finding the power of the water, with all his experience, difficult to handle. Nicely through the upstream gate with little time or energy wasted. Across the river to our right before coming all the way the full width of the course for yet another upstream gate. David Hearn, consistent as ever throughout the season. The 31-year-old, the runner-up in 2 of this season's World Cup races and 3rd in the other 2 races before today. Sadly for David, today was not to be the day for him to win that first title. On the first run, a whole series of errors held him up and cost him precious time, which meant that when he crossed the line, he had a time of 157 seconds well down the field. So he knew it all depended on his second run. But as he came down towards the finish, his chance had already gone. A gate missed, 50 seconds added, and he was outside the top 15 with no World Cup point in this final race. The last man on the course, John Lugbill, the champion, 29, from Bethesda, Maryland. A man who's won 5 World Championships, the first in 1979, the last a year ago. The man who started as a kid on the Potomac River. The World Cup champion of the past 2 seasons. Set out having had a disastrous first run by his standards. A gate missed, a gate touch, 55 seconds penalties, and knowing that to finish the season in style, he'd have to produce yet another famous fast and clean run. But could he do it? He was now chasing the time of the West German, Martin Lang, who'd come down on his second run in 135 seconds. But this is where Lugbill turned it on. The fastest paddler of all, clean through the upper section of the course and showing the sort of form that won him that 5th World Championship a year ago. The speed of the boat, absolutely astonishing. Straight through the gates. The nose brought round and onwards and onwards. Three victories in the opening 3 races of the competition. A tremendous record. Lugbill with his eye on that gold medal in the Barcelona Olympics, to complete every honour in this sport. Perfectly round gate 17 and clear, ferrying across the back of the stopper. Through 18 with just 2 gates to go. John Lugbill, clean, no gate touch, and much quicker than his first run. But could he beat that time of Martin Lang? Martin Lang, who had a 5-second penalty, Lugbill, who was clean, and at the end he was just 0.04 of a second slower than the West German. So the hat-trick was completed as Falocci moved into silver medal position ahead of Hearn, who didn't score, with the 20-year-old from Nottingham, Gareth Marriott, finishing just off the podium in 4th place. Much promise for the future. But it was John Lugbill who received the trophy from his own coach, Bill Endicott, director of the World Cup Promotion Committee. So to the men's kayaks and Richard Fox, who a year ago started his challenge to regain the World Championship title he'd won in 1985 in disastrous fashion, touching gate number 1 and earning a 5-second penalty. Well, he was under pressure before he started, but now he's really got to pull out something special. He had problems at 3, but not this time round. 4, just a touch low. It would have been nicer if he'd been tighter to the gate, but at least he's avoided penalties there. Coming down to 16, the view that Richard has. Oh, and that's lovely. Did that wonderfully well, and again through 17. Every stroke counting, the boat continually moving. And he's made up some precious seconds in the centre of the course as he comes down to 19. This important as well, not perfect, but good enough.
You can see the aggression as he fights his way down here. Such a contrast to a lot of the paddles that have just been down.
This course is tough, it favours the experience. You've got to be fit, you've got to be strong. Now look at him push the power into the paddles now. But if he's got any chance, it's got to be 100% perfect here. That was good, he was quickly onto the wave. This has got to be great, and it is. And Fox is beginning to fly. But the clock ticking away. Clouseau's time on the left as he goes for gate 25. Nicely through there. Punching on down. Remember, there's a 5-second penalty to add, and he's got to add that on to 3:13.61, and that's good enough. And Richard Fox goes into the lead for Great Britain.
A brilliant effort to earn him his 4th World Championship. And like John Lugbill, he came to Yugoslavia this year in search of his 3rd World Cup title. But the competition amongst the men's kayaks much more fierce. The first 4 all in with a chance. Martin Hemmer of West Germany, 22 years of age, a big man, 1 meter 84, 84 kilos, ideally suited to the strong, powerful water at the top of this course. The winner of World Cup race number 3 in Augsburg on the Ice Canal. And really showing tremendous form on the top section of this course. Very quickly through the opening section of gates. For the man who didn't manage to finish the second run of the World Championship slalom, when he was within meters of the finish line, he capsized and lost his chance of a medal. But Hemmer today on top form. Soldier. He was 10th in the World Cup of 1988. Didn't compete until Augsburg and just got 1 point in Borg Samoris in the race of before today's final. But the first run really excellent, 133.46 seconds, and that time something for him to build on as he started to try and improve on that in his second run down the course. All competitors in slalom having 2 runs, their best run counting. Kayak, sitting in the kayak with that double-bladed paddle, whizzing through the upstream gates and really making the course look quite easy. The poles for the kayak race set a little lower and in a more normal position than the men had in the single canoe class. Hemmer, 122.37 seconds for his second run, clean, no penalties, and that good enough to take the lead. Janusz Skok of Yugoslavia, the local man from Ljubljana, almost won the World Cup 2 years ago. He missed out by just 1 point behind Richard Fox. Fourth place starting today's race with 44 points, but knowing that a victory could just get him there onto the winner's podium. Plenty of local support for the 27-year-old, who, unlike Martin Hemmer, is a much smaller man. 1 meter 69 kilos. The best result in this season's World Cup, a second place in Warsaw, Wisconsin, in the opening World Cup race of the season. But that form was deserting him, at least in the first run. 3 gate touches, 15 seconds to add, and lots of holds over the opening series of gates meant that he had a total time of 154.2 seconds. So, like so many, it was all down to the second run. First section was faster. As he moved down to the bottom part of the course, it was essential that he didn't pick up any penalties. Skok, very concentrated, looking for success in front of his own home crowd. Friends and family out to cheer him on. 17, the final undoing. Upstream, a touch on the gate, held, time ticking away. And the good work that he'd achieved on the top section of the course was all undone as he got caught ferrying across the stopper to 18. In the end, he was still to be quicker than his first run time, but not close enough to challenge the likes of Hemmer. 133.73, respectable, but a time that was to leave him outside the top 15 with no extra World Cup points. Third place, having the season of his life, Pierpaolo Ferrazzi. 56 World Cup points, including a victory in the last race at Bourg Saint-Maurice, just a few days before the paddlers travelled across Europe from France to Yugoslavia. Ferrazzi, full of confidence, the 25-year-old forest ranger. Low on that gate, but no mistakes. Breaking out of the fast water to take the upstream gates and coming across really tight and losing absolutely nothing. Kayak moving all the time. The diagonal gate, good at that, but a little low on this upstream gate. The first run for Ferrazzi looking good right the way from the start. Confident. Still clean with absolutely no penalties. A year ago he finished 18th in the World Championships, and in the World Cup competitions of the past 2 years, the best he did was 14th place, but that was back in 1988. Last year, he was only 17th. Good coaching and training through the winter has given this man enormous confidence. Today, he looks the complete canoeist as he comes down really in charge of this first run, and the time tells the story. 120.23 seconds, the fastest man on the course. So, could Richard Fox do, as he has done so many times, come from behind to take the title? 30 years of age, from Nottingham, 4 times world champion, 4 times Europa Cup champion, and like John Lugbill, looking for a hat-trick of World Cup victories. Really finding this water at the top tough to handle. More than 150 people swum on this section of the course in the past week during training and racing. On his first run, Richard Fox found himself not quite as tight to the gates as he would have wished. Fractions of a second being lost, and when added up, making all the difference between his time and that of Pierpaolo Ferrazzi. 9 seconds the difference after his first run. So the master paddler now had to find the precision and extra speed to close the gap if he wanted to hold on to the title he first won in 1988. As in the first run, he was having problems keeping as tight to the gates as he would have wished. The hundredths were adding up. As he came down towards the lower third of the course, the time was possible, but very tight. As he came through to the last 5 gates, the clock was telling its own story. Fox was over the 122nd time of Pierpaolo Ferrazzi, and the question was now whether he could get second place, which might just give him enough World Cup points to hold on to his title. Ferrazzi, with 120 seconds, was in the lead, with Martin Hemmer, who had 122 seconds, in second place. But as Fox moved on down to the finish, it was clear that the best he could do was third place at this point. 124.06, giving him 15 World Cup points. The last man on the course, Luboš Hilgert for Czechoslovakia. Runner-up a year ago in the World Cup, setting out to challenge to win his first major title. In the lead after the first 4 races, but knowing that a victory was essential to make sure of this title. Control through the big water and the opening gates. Now he had to open up and gain some speed if he was to catch the Italian Pierpaolo Ferrazzi. But as he moved across to the next upstream gate, he made a major mistake. Swept down onto the rock, caught and trapped. The seconds ticking away, but also the momentum and rhythm broken. Hilgert trying to make up the time, nicely tight to that gate. Ducking through the downstream gates. The diagonal gate causing him no problem. And back on course with a chance of catching the Italian. But the middle part of the course saw him lose his momentum once again. The gap between him and the Italian widened with a gate touch on 13, which left him with a total time of 133.73 seconds, 13 seconds behind Ferrazzi. The second run turned out to be a greater disaster. 5 gates missed, which meant that the Italian took the title, 4 points clear of Richard Fox, who finished third on the day. Martin Hemmer moving up to fourth, with Janusz Skok the best for the home country. With the honours in the 1990 World Cup going to the Italian, Pierpaolo Ferrazzi.
Well, we're going to be going to Goodwood very shortly, but I think we should turn our attention to some cricket, because there's some important games, the penultimate games, in fact, in the Britannic Assurance Championship. Let me just remind you of the situation at the top of the table. Only 14 points in it, remember, and the chase for the title is still on. All the cricket news from the scoreboard coming up right now, but we're going to begin with the big 2 that are in there. That's Essex in their game against Kent at Chelmsford, but first of all, Middlesex versus Surrey at the Oval.
Darren Bicknell, with his 5th century of the season, continued to frustrate leaders Middlesex at the Oval today. The Surrey opener finally fell for 114 to Simon Hughes before England tourist Phil Tufnell took 2 wickets in successive overs to boost Middlesex's hopes. At Chelmsford, Essex against Kent. It's also been a bit of a struggle for second place Essex so far today. Kent captain Neil Taylor made a fine 86 before Essex's acting captain Neil Foster took the